Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Roland and the program is called Shedding Shackles. That's the way I begin all my radio programs. Some of you enjoy these YouTube videos. You really ought to check out my radio programs because they're very good, and they also have some nice music. And I think you'll like them. Now today I want to continue reading from A Short and Easy Method of Prayer by Madame Jean Guyon. And I'm reading from a translation which is entitled Experiencing God Through Prayer. Donna C. Arthur. Donna C. Arthur is the editor. And I'm going to read a little bit for you from chapter 9, Put Off the Old. I'm quoting. I now want to address those dear souls who are still having problems with their old self-nature and its desires. The self-nature, that's a good way of describing it, isn't it? The self-nature. So what is it that gives us so many problems? It's not other people. It's the way we react to them. And how do we react to them? We react to them selfishly and angrily and resentfully. It's that self-nature. Now, you inherit that. It comes to you from your parents, and they got it from their parents all the way back to Adam and Eve. It's a little bit of the devil's nature, if you want to know the truth about it. Yeah, we need to have a little ego. We need to grow as little egos when we're kids. And how do we grow? Well, through tease and challenge. As long as it's not too much. See, most kids have way too much tease, way too much challenge. Because there's another way that children grow, and it's by discovery. In fact, that's the best way for children. Discovery. Can you remember when you were a child? Maybe it was a summer's day, no school. You didn't have to go sit for hours in some boring classroom. You woke up in the morning and the sun was shining and the birds were singing. You ran across the room ready for a day of discovery and adventure. Oh, there were so many wonderful things to discover, even in the backyard. Your toys, your puppy, your cat. Then the neighbor children your age. Oh, it was just wonderful. And you played and you learned at lightning speed. When you were a little kid, why, within the first couple of years, you learned how to walk and talk and everything. By the time you were 5 years old, you were really smart. And you asked questions, and you wondered about things, and you were curious. And so that's the way to grow. With a little bit of tease, but not too much. Children need a little tease and a little challenge. That's how their little egos grow. But then, when we get to be big egos, then we become ugly, don't we? We become selfish, mean-spirited, sneaky, devious, lying, two-faced, phony, don't we? And so what's that all about? Well, that's the fallen nature. That's what you become naturally. Because the innocent little teases of childhood and challenges of childhood, you know, where you run to see who can win the race, or who can jump higher, or who can count faster, or the little quizzes that you get at school, those type of things. When you get older, then the teases become bigger, don't they? The challenges become bigger. And more pressure is applied. And they say, if you don't study, if you don't go to school, if you don't go to college, if you don't make something of yourself, then you're nothing. So you got to have more, you got to be more and more and more. Endlessly. More study, more challenges, more things, more pressures. See, everywhere they pressure you. So then those pressures and those teases, they turn you into something mean and more. They turn you into something more selfish. Not just a little bit selfish, which is kind of cute when you're a little kid, but selfish in a very disgusting way. That's the old nature. Now, unless something new is added, that's all you have. So all you can be is a selfish, judgmental, resentful person pretending to be nice, putting on a good show for others. Or you can bury yourself in studying philosophy or studying religious texts. Or you can involve yourself and immerse yourself in doing for other people, usually spoiling them rotten. The more you give them, the worse they get. Don't you see that happening? And then you resent them, and then you feel guilty, and then you do more for them. And so you can get so involved in that, rushing to save other people, rushing to help other people, that you don't have to look at yourself. So for a while you feel like you're a pretty nice person. You see yourself helping people. You forgot how selfish you are. But there's really no change. You know, some people give up alcohol and take up religion. And then they give up religion and go back to the bottle. So there you have it. So what are you going to do? Well, there has to be a new nature. Can you give yourself a new nature? You cannot. Let me continue reading from Madame Guyon. She says, don't be discouraged. Scripture tells us that when God came to live within us by the Holy Spirit, and she's quoting now from Paul's letter to the Colossians, chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. She's quoting from Paul. We put off the old person with its deeds and have put on the new self, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created it. So you have to become more like Christ, more like Jesus, more like God. See, Jesus was the perfect, what's the word to use? In him we saw the glory of God shining through him. And through all that he suffered, he denied himself. Now do you understand? Christ once told us to pick up your cross and deny yourself. What is he talking about? He's saying that this old self that we have, this self that's selfish, judgmental, mean, bony, greedy, angry, etc., 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 you know. She said, the more you do for it, see, it's like spoiling people. You know, you give them, say, here's $1,000. Well, do they take the $1,000 and invest it wisely and use it for a good purpose and buy a little bit of organic food and give a little something to help someone who has a true need and save some of it or invest some of it or to in their business? No. What do? They go buy fast food and they eat like pigs, and then they throw the plastic boxes out the windows, don't they? Give them $1,000, and within a month they've gone through it. They go to the store and buy a bunch of stuff they don't need, and then they throw the plastic containers and boxes and packages out the window. Then it's all gone. So this old self, the more you do for it, the worse it gets. Becomes greedier. Give it, feed it, and it becomes greedier, hungrier, meaner, angrier. A lot of women know that when they're nice to their men. They were hoping that her husband would save her from her dark side. They hoped that he would be the noble knight, the noble prince. Instead, so she was nice to him. But the nicer she was to him, more selfish he became. The bigger a pig he became. See? And she felt guilty for resenting him. But then what did she do? She blamed herself. See, that's another ego trip. She blamed herself, playing God in other words, and condemned herself, said, well, I'm not being nice enough. So then she was even nicer to him, and then he became even worse. So I think you got the idea. This old self-lament, it just gets worse and worse. And the more people challenge you and the more they tease you, the more vile you become underneath. That's right, you become viler underneath. So there has to be a new nature. But Paul is saying now, if you have received something of this new nature, and when it might happen, I can't tell you. It's of God. When you're ready, and when he so wills it to happen, he begins to rescue you from this selfish self, this vile, sensual, beastly self. He begins to rescue you from it. And the first thing he does is he pulls you back a little bit. You know, I heard a man say, a very wise man once said that he had heard General Schwarzkopf. So I'm giving you a secondhand story, but it sounds credible to me. I believe it. General Schwarzkopf was a great general. And they once asked General Schwarzkopf, they said, well, have you ever been in danger of your life, of losing your life? And he said, yes. And they said, well, what did you do? He said, I don't know how to describe it, but he said, I somehow pulled back. Somehow I pulled away into myself, and the danger passed, and I was safe. How many of you understand that? Well, God gives you that. It's a protection. So he pulls you back a little bit, and you feel a little bit distant to things. And actually you're in what I call the meditative state, a little bit distant. And you see things as they are. And he gives you that objectivity along with that distance. And then you begin in that state, that aware state, that protected state. Do you remember when Christ went into the desert and then he was tempted? It says in one of the translations, I'm not sure which one, but it said he went into an unprotected state. See, when you're protected, it's like having a force field around you. You see things, but they don't touch you. They might want to, but they don't. And it's a protected state. Well, God gives you that when he begins to rescue you from your darkness. And then he gives you a little bit of light, spiritual light. Then you begin to see, and you see yourself for what you are. You see your selfishness and your mean-spiritedness and your hatefulness. You see it. And you regret what you see. You regret what you see. But you also realize you can't change yourself. See, that's another fundamental realization. You realize you can't change yourself. You realize in God's light. You see yourself in his light. You regret what you see, but you realize you can't change yourself. So it's a helplessness. So what can you do? Nothing. Nothing. Just see it. God will take care of it. He knows how to resolve old traumas and how to take away the bad. It's like hanging a dirty towel out in the sunlight, and then later you go and it's fresh and clean. He knows how to do that stuff. See, the problem with you is you try to save yourself. You see your own wrong, you try to change yourself. You set goals. Well, I'm going to be nicer. I'm going to do more for people. I'm going to be nicer to my husband. I'm going to give more money to the poor. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to go to, see? Another goal, another pressure that somebody gives you. So yeah, somebody gives it to you. So now you're following them, the source of that goal, of that pressure. You're still not following God. Even if the pressure says, study the Bible, read a chapter every day. If you follow that regimen, then you're following them. You're not following God. You're following them. You're following the spirit behind them. You're following them. You're following the goal which represents them. So now can you see why food has such a hold over you? Because that was in the original scene in the Garden of Eden. The original trauma scene, it was food. See? And food represented what? Seeing oneself as separate from God. Trying to do it on one's own. Thumbing one's nose at God and trying to be a big man. That's what food represented. Now when a person looks at food, it puts them back into that trance state. And in that trance state, they are separate from God. And then they eat, and it consoles them in their fallen state. It soothes the savage beast. And it fills the hunger, but it doesn't really fill the true spiritual hunger, but it fills the hunger. But in a way, it does fill the spiritual hunger, because you know what? When you eat food wrongly, when you desire to escape reality, when you desire to see yourself as a wonderful being, then when you eat the food, you take in the spirit. So the spirit, this other spirit, this alternative to God comes. Yeah, it fills you, and it fills you with all kinds of ideas. And you get notional. Yeah, notional. We get notional, don't we? And then thoughts come to our mind. Well, it's his fault. Or it's her fault. It's my boss's fault. The company doesn't appreciate me. I should throw it in their face and go to work for the competitor. My wife doesn't appreciate me, and this other woman is really better looking and she understands me. And see, and all kinds of notions. Or daydreams of more things to eat, more pleasure, more excitement, more entertainment. So it consoles the savage beast, and then it prods the savage beast. See, on the one hand, it consoles you. Then after it consoles you, it turns around and stabs you in the back and tells you you're no good. You should do away with yourself. You're not working hard enough. You're not doing any good. People would be better off without you. So yeah, the spirit of paradise lost. So that also is part of this fallen life, you see. It's not only that we become a beast self, a selfish self, but then there's something prodding us and driving us. Isn't it true? There's always somebody prodding you, whether it's the government, or it's your wife, or your angry husband, or the teacher, or an unreasonable boss, or your mom, or the spirit of your mom, or her voice inside you now prodding you. You got to work harder. You got to do this. You got to clean that. You got to do this. There's no peace. So God has a way of diminishing that when salvation has begun. I'm going to continue reading here. She said, you will find yourself warring against your own flesh nature as long as you are still in your human body. It is almost impossible to acquire total death to your senses and passions. Well, she's talking about senses and passions, but you understand what she means here. Then here comes a good part. She says, the only genuine means of bringing about change is by inward means. You must commit yourself wholly into the hands of a loving God. The simple act of commitment in every circumstance where self exerts itself will, in time, produce a separation of the sensual from the spiritual. A separation. Remember I talked about standing back, taking a mental step back, being a little distant, and then seeing things as they are. But you see, when you're in this state, this meditative state, then God gives you power. That's the other thing. He gives you power over your unruly self. So you rage less. You're angry less. You're out of control less. You're anxious less. And it diminishes. And then one day it's gone. And you look at yourself and you say, you know, I used to have these fits of rage. I don't have them anymore. It's beautiful. God does it. So you need to rely upon Him so that He can recreate you. So He can change you and then renew and refresh this new self every day. It's a new life. It's a whole new life. And then your body, instead of being a vehicle for improper pining and lusting and yearning and so on, lusting after self-righteousness, not after righteousness, but after self-righteousness, and pleasure to take away the pain of the truth about yourself. And instead of yearning and lusting for something to take you away from reality, from pain, from the truth about your inadequacies and your selfishness and your see? Instead of lusting for that, now you yearn for the truth. You want the truth. And now the truth permits you to look at yourself. And then as the big resentments go away and the huge angers and the buried suppressed rage, and as those things surface and are seen and go. See, what is it, this rage thing anyway? Something in you raging. But what is it? How did it get in? Well, see, whenever we sin, that's a good word, something from the outside gets on the inside. Not only the memory and the image, I'm writing about that right now in my book, but the outside gets on the inside. But not only does the thing itself get in, the image of the thing or the substance or whatever, but the spirit of the violator, the spirit of the, yeah. So did your mother rage? She hated her husband. One day you'll see that rage in you. And it rages. It doesn't like the good. It doesn't like the truth. It doesn't like sweetness. It doesn't like laughter. No. How many, remember, I've used this example so many times, but you have the dinner scene, typical dinner scene where the family is sitting at the dinner table. The kids are giggling. And all of a sudden the parent rises up with rage and hate in their face. And they say, stop that giggling, wipe that grin off your face. Something about giggling and about happiness and lightheartedness. It hates. And when I say it, I mean it in them. But see, the problem is if you hate your parent, then it gets in you. Then it is in you, and then one day it will express itself against your children, and you say, what's that? What's that all about? So a lot of people are going around with these other identities in them. Rage, lust, judgment, hatred. Yeah, they came from others, but there they are in you. And then you have to try to suppress them and hide them and cover them up and pretend they're not there. Even that can become fatiguing. So, like I've always said, do you want to do it your way or do you want to do it God's way? Well, you've tried it your way, haven't you? You've tried it. It hasn't worked. So why not do it his way? I'm continuing to read from Madame Guyon. The nearer your spirit draws to... Oh, I wanted to comment about what she said. She said the simple act of commitment to God, in other words, in every circumstance where your self exerts its will. See, that's the thing, this willfulness. In the past, you've always exerted your will. You tried to make things happen. You tried to smooth things over. You tried to force things to conform. And you tried to make yourself good, and tried to save yourself, and tried to improve yourself. And you always tried, and people encouraged you to try. They said, try, try, try. If you didn't try, they said, well, you're lazy, or you're oppositional, or you have bad attitudes. So you tried, but you tried. Your will exerted itself. So what do you think? Anger and rage? How did some of that part of it is your will, you trying to exert yourself, trying to make something happen. Now, admittedly, when we were little children, sometimes people did something bad to us, and we became very angry. But the problem is, then we learned to be angry, and then we had to suppress the anger. And then, when other situations came along, then we became angry again in those situations, just as we want. And then new situations came along that weren't even that were totally different than the original one, but resembled the original one in some way. Then here comes the anger again. And it in you uses that anger. See, if there was no anger, no rage, no lust, no hate, no judgment, then it couldn't use you. It needs you to energize yourself in order to carry out its will on earth as it is in hell, okay? So when you become filled with rage, then it expresses itself to you. The next time you're really, really angry or resentful, notice the awful thoughts that come to your mind, mean things to say, creatively cruel and vicious things to say. See, where'd that come from? Well, see. So now you have to just stand back from all of that. Realize that struggling with it is not the answer, but giving into it is not the answer either. What you have to do is stand back and yearn for your Creator, yearn for the Father you've never known, yearn for something good and true, and practice my little meditation so that you can have a little mental distance. And then you can look at all these things without their upsetting you. See, in the past, whenever you saw them, it upset you or angered you, or you felt defeated because you knew you tried to struggle against it and it didn't work. Now you just watch it. That's all. Just see it. Don't try to do anything about it. Just notice it. And it will diminish. Because God gives you that gift. The light to see it in, and the power to simply stand back and observe without coming unglued. And then it sees you watching it. It feels exposed. And it sees that you're not its anymore. It can't have its way with you like it always did. And people see it too. They used to always have their way with you. They knew how to push your buttons. And then you would just dance for them like a puppet. Now, all of a sudden, there's something different. They see you looking at them, and they realize the game is up. Yeah, they might still try something, but it doesn't work. You watch them. You don't resent them. You don't hate them. You just watch them. And then they go away and bother somebody else. So, Madame Guyon. It's a nice little book, isn't it? I love this book. Chapter 9, Put Off the Old. I'm reading from Experiencing God Through Prayer by Madame Guyon. Donna C. Arthur is the editor.